I don't think negotiations are about trust. That word is thrown around a lot. I don't trust Iran, but I do think you have to have some respect that your adversary has interests. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation, so they have to get something out of it.
Wendy Sherman, diplomat and negotiator, on how to unlock a deal with Iran. How do you think this is going to end?
What will happen to that stockpile of highly enriched uranium? It's not like you can resolve that in a day. It is a complex, tedious operation under very difficult security arrangements.
From Bloomberg Weekend, this is the Mishal Husain Show. How should we make sense of another dramatic week in the situation between the US and Iran? Blockade, ships being fired on, essentially the use of force alongside a diplomatic track, or at least an attempt at one. That's the backdrop to this episode as we continue to look at the Iran war from different angles. And this time, it's with someone who knows what it's like to negotiate for the United States with Iran. Because she did it. She's been in those rooms. It was for a different American president, but elements of the Iranian lineup she knew are still there. She's Ambassador Wendy Sherman, longtime US diplomat, former Deputy Secretary of State, who worked on the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. That's the one abandoned by Donald Trump in his first term. And by the time she left the State Department in 2023, she'd been President Biden's key person on China. So this conversation goes beyond the Middle East, to China, to Russia, and to Europe. But for obvious reasons, Iran is where we began.
I think that it's quite critical for people to understand Iran's culture, its history, its people, its government, its theology. It's very different than American or Western sensitivities. It is a culture of resistance. When the 1979 Iranian Revolution happened, it was really a reaction to what we and the British had done in 1953 when we knocked off a prime minister because we were afraid that Iran was going to nationalize the oil industry, and we thought that would hurt us, oil being the constant here. And so we put in the Shah of Iran, who was probably good for us, Westerners, but terrible for Iran. He was quite oppressive, quite a dictator, and it led to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And it is remaining a culture of resistance. So every time President Trump tries to bully Iran, Iran has immense pride and dignity. It's not something we all understand because they're a terrible regime that slaughtered protesters in the street, but it is who they are.
I imagine that this kind of sweep of history, which you're describing right now, this must have been what it was like when you sat in those rooms with Iranian negotiators. Did they lecture you along these kinds of themes?
We certainly, at the beginning of the negotiations, had lots of lectures and lots of lectures from those who were in Tehran. Over time, however, we just got down to the brutal details of this negotiation. When you're negotiating around nuclear issues or military issues or proxies, the devil is definitely in the details.
Yeah, but the fact that you're mentioning the historical context now, does that mean that you are saying that the Trump administration needs to understand this and doesn't, and they will only get so far if they don't?
Without a doubt. The regime now is more hardline than even the previous supreme leader, who was pretty hardline. And I think there's a great deal, even more control by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps than there was before. And that means that the concessions the president thinks will come easily will not come easily. They will resist. They will never, I believe, give up what they believe is their right to enrich. They may voluntarily suspend it, but they won't give up the right. I don't think they'll give up their relationship to their proxies. They may reduce the level of their support. I don't think they'll give up their missile program, though they may be willing to constrain it in some ways. So I don't think that when President Trump wants them to really just capitulate, That's never going to happen.
But precisely because it is such a hardline regime, harder line, you're saying, than the one you dealt with, isn't there therefore a role for this kind of maximum pressure strategy, the keeping Iran on its toes, the constant changing of position, the overwhelming use of military force? For example, the Navy has been destroyed. Does that give the United States a point of leverage?
I think that there always, in these kind of negotiations, needs to be a credible threat of force. And in this case, perhaps even the use of some of the mechanisms the president has used. But I think he believes not only in a madman theory, which is act crazy and people will not know what you're going to do, but I think he doesn't have a strategy. I think he's very tactical, very transactional, as he was as a builder, as a developer. And in this case, I don't think that transactional approach will actually work in the end. It may get him some leverage, but I don't see an overall strategy, and I don't think it's been clear what he really will consider success. Sarah Longwell, who's the publisher of The Bulwark, certainly not a progressive magazine, she's a neoconservative, has said that the president is committing superpower suicide. And I think that's a good description, because what he has done has cost our alliances, has cost our American taxpayers, and of course 13 American lives, and an enormous cost to our military, to our inventory of weapons, to our ability to project our power abroad.
And I imagine you would never have had a positive view of Donald Trump and his foreign policy, right? You worked in the Biden administration, you worked for the Obama administration before that. So his worldview would never have been yours.
I'm not sure what his worldview is. My greatest concern, Mishal, is not any specific thing he does. It's, does he have a plan? Does he have a strategy? Or does he just go by impulse every day about what he thinks he needs to do next? And sometimes that's useful to trust your gut and your instincts, but not every day in every way. So no, I'm not a supporter of the president's, but I am a supporter of the United States of America. And I am a supporter of American foreign policy and American power. But I think our projection of power should be to get to a good result, and you need strategy before you take action.
I want to use your expertise to dig into some of the latest news lines at the point that we're speaking. What is most worrying to you? And it's hard to know where to start in terms of the dramatic instances of the last few days. For example, the US firing on an Iranian ship, Iran also reportedly firing on Indian ships, blockade by the United States, and also the closure of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. What stands out to you?
Well, I think the last point really stands out to me and is another downside of what's occurred. Before this war, the Strait of Hormuz was open. There was freedom of navigation. It was important to the world's economy. Now, I think Iran will always believe that they have control over the Strait of Hormuz. Even if they open it up again, which I certainly hope happens, we all know they can close it again. They may exert other kinds of control, tolls, approval by the IRGC. I have no idea where this will all end, but that is of great concern because freedom of navigation is critical to the world economy.
And are you saying that they will always be able to close it again, even if the US continues a blockade, even if the US sends more military assets to the area, even if the US wipes out even more Iranian military assets?
Well, certainly we can do that, but it would come at enormous cost to us. And the Strait, as I think everybody has now seen on a map, is a very narrow channel. And along the coastline are Iranian military assets. And we have all seen, both in the war in Ukraine and now in the Middle East, drone technology has changed how wars are waged. And so Iran will always have capability. And yes, there is no question that President Trump has diminished Iran's capability, has destroyed their navy, but not their fast boats, not their drone technology. They haven't bombed away their nuclear knowledge. Yes, they have pushed the highly enriched uranium underground, but they have not bombed away all of Iran's knowledge. And it may take them time to reconstitute their missiles, their navy, their nuclear program. All of that may be true, but I think they will try to do so.
And do you think that actually the Strait of Hormuz could be controlled and kept closed, even with a few men with small arms on speedboats?
It certainly will make it concerning for shippers. Shipping is about insurance, and whether insurers feel there's adequate security to let those ships go through. And so at the end of the day, that's a decision the ships will have to make. And even in the brief time when it was, quote unquote, open again, the insurers didn't think it was safe enough to send the ships through. And that's really the bottom line here.
Before we talk about the Iranian officials, you know, some of whom are in even more prominent positions than they were when you were negotiating, what are you hearing about the president himself? Do you think he is well? There's been increasing talk in the last week or so about the extent to which he is posting through the night, about the nature of his decisions. Some people feel that we are moving into a different era in terms of his decision-making.
I can't begin to know what is in President Trump's head. I'm not sure he knows from moment to moment. He's always tweeted at night. He is a night owl. He starts his day late. I don't think that's new, but I do think his impulse behavior has increased. And that is of great concern to me. I'm not sure he understands the stakes here. It's not about just winning this war. It's about what it means for America going forward. He's due to go to China in May to meet with President Xi. I think he's going to go in a weakened position, no matter how things turn out, because even if an agreement is reached, it will be principles, it will be broad outlines, and then people will have to do all of the details, which will take weeks, if not months, if not over a year, to resolve. And so there will be this disequilibrium for a very long time in the Middle East. We have allies in the Middle East who are now saying, send us your dollars or we're going to have to use Chinese yuan to be able to go through the Strait of Hormuz. People have turned to China to build a trade relationship because they don't feel they can rely on the United States anymore. Some of our best allies, Canada, the UK, have said they can't rely on us and have beaten a path to China. This would be of great concern to all of us.
But can I take you back in time? Because one of the things I noticed in your book, which I found really striking in the present context, is the keeping allies out at key moments. I see what you're saying about this is a whole different degree, but elements of this have happened before, haven't they? In your book, you describe the secret back channel that you were part of with Iran and the moment that you had to go to Brussels and tell the Europeans that there was a complete draft agreement between the US and Iran in place, of which they knew nothing.
Indeed. I think everyone understands, and certainly understood then, that if we could not get an agreement, it would be the American military that would have to intervene and try to change the calculus of Iran. And everyone understood that no deal would be made unless it was a deal the United States could agree to. No one likes that we have unequal power. I understand that, but everybody understands it. So my European allies, Cathy Ashton was the high representative at the time. She was not shocked. She was not surprised. My European allies were not happy, but they were not shocked. And Russia and China, who were part of this negotiation, also were not shocked and actually were sort of happy that things were moving along, that President Obama had made a very courageous decision in opening up this channel. So, yes, the U.S. has unequal power. It is undoubtable among the world. But we have to be humble about it. We have to have humility.
But do you accept then that this is a version of what has happened before rather than an entirely new development? I mean, actually to keep a secret like that from people who are on the same side as the United States as far as Iran's concerned?
So, no, I don't think it's the same, because I think this is of such a magnitude. And it's not just about Iran. We brought all of our European allies in. We brought Russia and China in. We went to the United Nations. I spent an enormous amount of time talking to the Gulf Arab states, an enormous amount of time talking to Israel, to Australia, to anybody else who wanted to talk about what we were doing. So we were as transparent as we possibly could be in a timely fashion. And that deal that came in through the secret channel had brackets in it. There was still some things to be negotiated. And the ministers came together and, in fact, didn't agree initially to what we had put on the table. We're quite unhappy about it, actually. So some changes were made. So people had input. America acted with its power, but we did not act alone.
And a key point person on the other side at that time was Abbas Araghchi, who is now Iran's foreign minister, who was there at those Islamabad talks. What should we know about him? What was your experience of him?
He is very smart. He is very tough. His English is quite good. All the negotiations were in English. Before we had the negotiation led by Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, and Araghchi was one of his deputies, we had a negotiation with Saeed Jalili, and Araghchi was on his team, but we never knew he spoke English because everything was done in Farsi. So Araghchi's very tough. He can get angry. He is part of the revolution. He was part of it then. He has bona fides. He had a strong relationship with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, even though he's getting some criticism now. I think some of that is drama.
So you'd seen him around these rooms, but you didn't realize that he spoke such good English until suddenly you were negotiating with him.
It was quite astonishing. I don't even think we all recognized he was part of the delegation when Jalili led it, but then things changed dramatically.
Am I right in thinking that you did develop something of a bond with him, that these were difficult talks, but there was something of a relationship that formed?
Yes. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think negotiations are about trust. That word is thrown around a lot. I don't trust Araghchi. I don't trust Iran. He doesn't trust me. They don't trust me. In fact, at one point, there was death to Wendy Sherman on the streets of Tehran.
That was because of something you had said about Iran, which became essentially a news point there.
Exactly. We got past that. But I do think you have to have some respect that your adversary has interests. You may not agree with their interests. You may think they're horrible, and I think the regime is awful, but they do have interests. And so you have to understand that. And even though it was an unequal negotiation, we were the demandeur, they were the adversary. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation, so they have to get something out of it.
I'm going to quote a part of your book where you describe this experience. Amid the host of topics, nuclear and non-nuclear, cultural and political, that we could not talk about, Araghchi and I made a permanent human connection. Years after the end of the negotiations, Araghchi still sends me a greeting at Christmas time, and I send him greetings at Nowruz, the Iranian New Year. Although I don't as a Jew celebrate Christmas, I do appreciate the holiday sentiment. We don't know how our human connections may yet serve the world. Did you this year on the Iranian New Year send him a greeting?
No, and we haven't been in touch in years now. Since the first Trump administration, no. All of the ties were broken. So no, I haven't been in touch at all. And, you know, as I wrote in the book, he and I became grandparents at the same time. So we showed each other pictures of our infants. I had a discussion with he and Takravanchi about being Jewish. They knew I was Jewish. That was sort of strange. I couldn't shake their hand because I was a woman. And I had a conversation with the two of them on the margins once saying, you know, we really have something in common. I grew up in a Jewish community where there were Orthodox Jews and men could not shake my hand. And at first they were sort of stunned that I was having this conversation. But then we talked about it. And some of it was real and some of it wasn't. We all knew each other well enough to know some of it was trying to reach across to understand each other. But it just creates a human bond. Again, it doesn't change that they have interests and they're going to negotiate as tough as they can. It didn't change what the president, what the Secretary of State had tasked me to do. But we could sort of take down the veil a little bit to be able to deal with each other. Because for 28 days at the end of this negotiation, we were all in a hotel together. I ate one meal outside that hotel. And you can't spend that much time, same with my European and Russian and Chinese colleagues, without getting to know each other.
Did you hesitate about telling them you were Jewish?
No, because I knew they knew. Likewise, it was a very strange circumstance. The negotiation was coordinated by the High Representative of the European Union, first Cathy Ashton, then Federica Mogherini, two women. Their deputy was Helga Schmidt, a wonderful German diplomat who was seconded to the European Union, a woman, and then me, head of the U.S. delegation. And I had women in my delegation, but the other delegations at the start did not have women. But over time, everybody found a woman to bring, because I think they thought they could deal with the high representative, with Helga and with me better if they had a woman on their delegation. And I'm glad for that if I helped other women rise up a little bit.
Of course, that is completely absent now. And any women in the room on the American side or the Iranian side?
Indeed. Well, there were never on the Iranian side. But it's interesting. So many of the reporters and press people from Iran are women.
So what about the absence of women on the American side? Does that jump out to you as you look at like the pictures of the talks in Islamabad? And presumably it'll be the same kind of scene if it happens again.
Well, it certainly jumps out at me, but doesn't surprise me. But what I care about here is that we get to a good end. And if the President of the United States and his team, which I think is not really well seasoned to do this negotiation, if they come to an agreement that is good for our country and for the world, I'll be for it.
So let's talk then about what a deal could look like to resolve this, because you've got the American demands on one side, an end to enrichment, an end to the ballistic missile program. On the Iranian side, they'd like an end to sanctions. I'm simplifying. What do you think the landing zone could be for a deal?
Well, what we've heard, what's been reported, is perhaps a suspension of their enrichment program for X number of years, whether that's 10 or 15 or 20, I don't know. And it would have to be monitored and verified by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and it would have to be quite an intrusive kind of monitoring and verification. It would mean some controls on their missile program, so they can't get a long-range ballistic missile that could reach the United States. And certainly Europeans would be very concerned about their ability to reach Europe, which would be sooner than being able to reach the United States. It might be some controls on their proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, other militias, the Houthis. It would certainly be opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which, as I said before, was always open until this war. The United States, I think Iran will want us out of the Middle East. And that is a problem. Our second largest naval base is in Bahrain, and we have other assets throughout the Middle East. And of course, Israel is an ally, and we try to protect their security. They will want us not to threaten them anymore, and they would want guarantees and assurances they won't be attacked again. There's lots of pieces of this puzzle on the table. And it's a very, very complex and very detailed negotiation.
Even more than what you did more than 10 years ago?
Much more.
I mean, the more we talk about it, the more elusive it feels. At the same time, I think that there are moments of opportunity that come out of the darkest times. So how do you think this is going to end? Because one way or another, surely it has to. Apart from anything else, the global economy is going to steadily be eroded in the coming months if it isn't.
I quite agree with you. Right now, all I see is a disequilibrium. What I mean by that is some broad outline where folks are going to have to spend quite a long time making sure the details undergird that broad outline. And while all of that happens, my guess is that Iran will still have some measure of control over the Strait. What will happen to that stockpile of highly enriched uranium? It's not like you can resolve that in a day. It is a complex, tedious operation under very difficult security arrangements.
Buried underground?
Buried underground, deep underground. We've done things like this before in Kazakhstan, but we did it with Kazakhstan's working with us. And I don't know how anyone will feel secure doing this with Iran. So there's so much to work out here, Mishal. I worry about the administration's ability to do it, since I don't think they've brought the technical expertise to the table. In the last round in Islamabad, I was glad to see that Vice President Vance brought some experts with him, but I'm not sure any of them were in any of the rooms. I'm not sure they were really working on everything that was needed to be done. And none of this is achieved by one person or even three negotiators, the Vice President Witkoff and Kushner. I had a core team of 15. I had the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Energy, who was a nuclear physicist who was brilliant. I had nuclear physicists and sanctions experts and lawyers and Treasury folks on my team. I had people who spoke fluent Persian on my team, Farsi as some people call it. I had literally hundreds in the U.S. government who were engaged in this. All of our national labs, all of our nuclear labs who could do the exquisite calculations that are necessary to know whether you've got what you think you've got. I don't see any of that infrastructure here to be able to get this job done.
What are the implications for the rest of the world? I'm going to pick out two countries in particular, China and Russia, because we, in the last few weeks on this show, have explored this situation, the war in Iran, from different angles. You mentioned China already. In what ways is it benefiting? What concrete ways?
Well, concretely, we've already seen several leaders of countries make their way to China because they want to strike trade deals with China. They don't feel like they can just rely on the United States. And that makes China stronger.
That was happening before this war.
But it's happening at an accelerated pace, I believe. We saw the Iranians say, you can come through the Strait of Hormuz if you pay us in Chinese yuan, in renminbi, so not U.S. dollars. Oil has always been traded in U.S. dollars. That may change, and the U.S. dollar has always been the world's reserve currency, and I think we will see a greater move to trying to at least get a basket of currencies. All of this diminishes U.S. power. Yes, there has been some hits against China. It's been harder for them to get their oil. We've been concerned about what they're sharing with Iran. But I think Xi, who has tremendous control over his country, the kind of control I think President Trump would love to have, will be in a very strong position. He also will be able to say, you took military action against a country for which there was no imminent threat. If we try to take further control of Taiwan, how can you criticize us? And that is very powerfully concerning.
And you led on China for the State Department as your last job in the Biden administration. Of course, China's also got to witness the U.S. at war and seen munitions being destroyed and depleted, and had a real sense of how the U.S. operates in a real-life military operation.
Yes, on one hand, they've seen that our military is staggeringly capable, exquisitely capable, really quite stunning. But they've also seen, as you noted, a depletion of our inventory. And we are trying, and the president is focused on trying to accelerate our production of that. But they have also seen that asymmetric warfare works as well, that the Iranians have used drones, the Strait of Hormuz, their missiles to be very targeted in what they do, and as a result have been able to keep our exquisite military off kilter.
But how would they use that information? What could they do that's similar to what Iran has done?
Well, they know their own asymmetric capabilities, trying to, in the South China Sea, take islands and create military bases out of rocks, is innovative and trying to keep us and other countries at bay. They will probably imagine, will Taiwan try to use drone technology? Will they try to use asymmetric warfare? And indeed, I think they know that the U.S. has probably been talking to Taiwan about making sure they understand asymmetric warfare. We are in a whole different world of warfare. And I haven't even begun to talk about what artificial intelligence is doing to warfare. It's all going to change and is changing dramatically.
Do you expect the Trump-Xi summit to go ahead next month? And what do you think the atmosphere will be like?
Right now, I do expect it to go forward. However, if everything falls apart and the United States escalates militarily in Iran, if President Trump, who I do believe is concerned about casualties, our casualties, I don't know how worried he is about Iranian civilian casualties because there have been many, but I think that if the president feels he has to escalate militarily, then it will be a problem for the summit to go forward.
Because he just wouldn't have the capacity, or just wouldn't be the climate, or because the Chinese actually might not want to meet him?
All of the above. All of the above. I think right now the president will want to go and show that he is not afraid, that he has power, that he has control, that, you know, he really is a president who in many ways admires President McKinley out of American history, who believed in spheres of influence, who believed in the use of tariffs, who believed in the use of the bully pulpit. The president likes all of those things. And so I think he would still want to go. And I think the reason they made it May, not April, is because they didn't know how long it would take to try to get this resolved, or at least get it to a place where there was this disequilibrium, but some stasis. So I think the president will still try to go, yes.
And Russia, has Russia benefited from this war?
Absolutely.
In what way?
Well, first of all, the United States has month by month taken off the sanctions on Russia. The president has done that because he wants to try to keep enough oil in the oil markets to lower the price. American taxpayers don't all understand that the price of oil is decided globally in the global markets. The president keeps saying, we have lots of oil in the United States. This doesn't bother us. We do have lots of oil, but that's not how the price gets decided. And so when Americans drive and they look at any gas station, they see the price has gone up from what it was. And every time something bad happens in the Middle East, it goes up again. So I think the president's got only so much time to resolve this. People have talked about, there are three things on the president's mind. Markets. We've seen how he uses Friday to say optimistic things, so the markets close well on Friday. Oil stays stable. Munitions, making sure we have enough. And our midterms, which are coming up. And most Americans make up their minds by this summer.
But that's what's so strange about all of this. I was here in Washington a few months ago talking to Peter Navarro, and all the talk was like this was going to be the year where the focus was on affordability, very conscious that the midterms were coming up. And then look at what happened. So is the calculation that there's still enough time to put the focus somewhere else in the next few months?
Well, what I see from the outside, and of course I'm not inside the White House, is the White House keeps trying to plan to deliver an affordability message. And the president steps on his own lines and ends up talking about our power, waging the war, that we are winning, that it's almost over. Every day it's almost over. And that's been going on for some time.
I do want to take you back to your time in the Biden administration and ask whether some of the seeds for what is happening now in the Middle East were laid in that time. You left government in the summer of 2023. That was before October the 7th. But as you watched Secretary Blinken and President Biden deal with Israel through the Gaza war, did they fail to restrain Israel in a way that has contributed to what we're seeing now?
I think America, Democrats and Republicans, have not dealt with the Middle East in a way that's helped really create stability and peace. And I put that on both parties, including Democrats. Obviously, the Iraq War was a disaster, and that laid the seeds for all kinds of things that we had to deal with. Then, of course, President Obama tried to deal with Iran through the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. That was undone by Trump. Biden tried, but Iran and the world thought, well, Trump cut it to pieces. And so there was no belief that anything was sustainable. Could the Biden administration have done more? I'm sure we could have. Every administration in hindsight could have done more, could have done differently, could have pressed hard. The politics in our country have been very tied up with our relationship with Israel in many ways. So it's a tough call. And it's something I think we all have to unpack and look back on.
Too tied up with Israel. I wonder what you think of that, given that it seems to be an increasing political issue now for Democrats and for Republicans.
I think that it is critical that Israel remain an ally of the United States and that we protect the right of a Jewish state. But I also believe that the Prime Minister has led us down a road, and we have been part of it, that has, in essence, created a genocide in Gaza, that has destabilized the Middle East. I think what President Trump did around the Abraham Accords was a good initiative, but he didn't follow through. He didn't really work what was necessary to get there, and he shouldn't have torn up the Iran nuclear deal any more than President Trump should not have ended our strong support for Ukraine in its fight against Russia, or have figured out a way besides the enormous cost to our country and to the world in what he has done in Iran.
I mean, you're voicing a very controversial view in calling Gaza a genocide. I wonder, in your community of Jewish Americans, what is your reading? Is this gaining currency? It's certainly seen more, isn't it, amongst younger Jewish Americans?
It's certainly seen among younger, but I think it is a grown view. And, you know, genocide is in many ways a legal term. So I can't make the legal analysis about whether it is literally a genocide. But there is no doubt that Gaza was demolished. Palestinians deserve a home and dignity and peace. And Israel absolutely deserves security and peace. And I am a strong supporter of Israel and the right of a Jewish state. But I am not a supporter of destroying any civilization or any people. That goes for the Palestinians. And I'm not for destroying the Iranian civilization either, or the Iranian people, as much as I might find the regime odious.
So finally, Ambassador Sherman, how are you handling this period yourself? I mean, are you finding it personally difficult? How do you cope when you see what's happening in the news, like knowing policy as you do and seeing mistakes as you see it? What's the impact on you? You served the United States all your professional life.
Right. I actually have found myself angrier and angrier because the cost is so great. The cost to American families is profound. The cost to the world is profound. The cost to our alliances, our partnerships, our future, young people from all around the world. They all know that their world is going to be controlled by artificial intelligence and quantum. And these are enormous challenges, and China is a main competitor in that world. And our ability to focus on that challenge is being diminished. And so, yes, every day I am more worried for my child, for my grandsons, about the world they're going to grow up in, and whether the America I love and believe in, whose 250th anniversary is coming up, will still be the America that I treasure.
Ambassador Wendy Sherman, thank you.
Thank you.